Hey church, this is Reverend Carissa with your Wednesday word for this Wednesday in the season of Easter. Now in church in the coming weeks, we're going to be talking about scriptures from the book of Acts. And a lot of people are not really familiar with the book of Acts. You know, we're very familiar with the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And often we've heard lots of quotes from the epistles, you know, the letter to the Romans or 1 Corinthians 13, love is patient, love is kind. But Acts is kind of wedged in there in between the Gospels and the letters. The book of Acts is really unique in the Bible. It's actually the sequel. Did you know that? It's the sequel to the Gospel of Luke. The Gospel of Luke starts out with the writer saying, you know, I've set out to write an orderly account of all the things of Jesus Christ. And then the book of Acts starts the same way, written to the same audience to say, here's what happened next. The book of Luke, part 2, that's the book of Acts. And the book of Acts, the activity of it is right there in the title, the Acts of the Apostles, or you could say the Acts of the Holy Spirit. That's what the book of Acts is all about. Now, a couple weeks ago, we celebrated Easter and the resurrection and Jesus rising from the dead, and all of that sets up what happens next in the book of Acts. The book of Acts is all about the community of the resurrection. It's the community of people living after the resurrection, after Jesus went back up into heaven, and they're trying to figure out, okay, now what? Now what's going to happen? The book of Acts shows us that God is still working and still acting, but with Jesus back in heaven, God starts acting in a different way. And God is now acting through this community, the community of the resurrection. So over the next several Sundays, skipping over Youth Sunday, but the other several Sundays from now, we're going to be looking at the different little episodes in the book of Acts where the Holy Spirit is on the move and doing God's work through the community of the resurrection. And in between the episodes that we get on Sunday morning, I'm going to be here online talking to you about other episodes that kind of fall in between, so you get the whole story of the book of Acts. Now, if you wanted to summarize the entire book of Acts in just one verse, you could do it. And you could do it right at the beginning of the book of Acts, Acts chapter 1, verse 8, where Jesus says to the disciples, "You will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in all Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth." That summarizes all of Acts. In the book of Acts, we're going to see Pentecost, that moment when the Holy Spirit comes to be with the disciples in a particular way and gives them power and authority and the words to speak. Holy Spirit comes and transforms their lives so that then they are equipped to go out and be witnesses of Jesus Christ. Witnesses are people who speak the truth of what they've seen in a way that changes the story for everybody else. And so these disciples are going to go out into all these places Jesus names and speak the truth of what they've seen in a way that changes the lives of everyone who hears it. And so Jesus says, you're going to do that in Jerusalem, right here where we're sitting at this moment. And then in Judea, so that's the region that they're in. And then it's Samaria, which is the region next door that was kind of, some people avoided, but Jesus says, you're going to be there, you're going to do this there, and to the ends of the earth. And we see that throughout the book of Acts, how the Holy Spirit moves through the disciples to make sure that the good news of Jesus, that the story of the resurrection expands and is not just a story that they tell over and over, but is a reality that they live into. I don't know if you remember, but back in the book of Genesis, chapter 12, God made a covenant with Abraham and Sarah. And when God made that covenant, God promised Abraham and Sarah that their descendants would be as numerous as the stars in the sky. And God also made a promise that God would bless them. And God said, through you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Now that was at the beginning of the story. God said, I pick this particular set of people, and through this set of people in particular, I promise that all the families of the earth are going to be blessed. And we followed through the Old Testament this particular set of people and how God has blessed the world through them. And then in Jesus, this particular set of people, it kind of expands outward to all the people of the world. And so what Jesus is saying here is this good news that you've experienced in me, this resurrection life that you've experienced, we're going to be a blessing to the whole world. That we're going to continue the promise that God made to Abraham and Sarah. We're going to bless all the families of the earth through you in Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. And we're going to see this in the book of Acts. The ends of the earth in ancient times were all the way in Rome or all the way as far south as Ethiopia. And wouldn't you know it, we're going to encounter somebody from Ethiopia in a couple weeks. We're going to see Paul go to Rome. It really is, the good news is going to spread to the ends of the known earth. So you might be wondering, Reverend Carissa, what in the world does this have to do with me? Like, what in the world does the book of Acts have to do with me? The book of Acts is full of crazy stories of things that, miracles that happen and amazing powers that the disciples have. And it sometimes feels unrealistic. Like, we don't see this happening now. How could this possibly speak to us today? But I want to point you again to that verse, that summary verse that Jesus gives them. And what prompts him to tell the disciples that this is the game plan? What prompts him is the disciples turn to Jesus right before he ascends into heaven. And the disciples say, Lord, is this the time when you will restore the kingdom to Israel? And Jesus replied, it is not for you to know the times or the periods that the Father has set by his own authority, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria to the ends of the earth. The reason Jesus tells them this game plan of the presence of the Holy Spirit and the expansion of the gospel is because they're trying to figure out what comes next. And I think for us, this is our question too. We too live in a time where Jesus is not literally walking around talking, laying hands on us. And so we have this question like, okay, God, Jesus is back in heaven. Now what? Now what happens? And the answer is, you're not alone. The Holy Spirit is with you. And you get to be a witness, telling the truth of what you've seen, the goodness of what you've seen, in a way where anybody who hears what you have to share is going to be changed as a result. So I want to encourage you to stick with me throughout the book of Acts to hear how God is on the move, even after Christ ascends back into heaven, because we live in these days as well, where we live in a real world with real conflicts and a life in the community of the resurrection. We're trying to figure out, like, how do we live together? How do we do this faithful thing? And how do we do it in a way where the Holy Spirit is working in and through us so that lives can be transformed? May you live in the good news of the resurrection today, and may you be aware of how the Holy Spirit is bringing you power and authority and moving in your life in such a way that you too have a witness to share that will make a difference for everybody who hears it. Hope to see you Sunday as we dive more deeply into the book of Acts.